I am Dr. Lwin. I am a menopause and lifestyle specialist GP based in London. And I founded Leniter Wellness, where we deliver monthly webinar educations and workshop and coaching for women over 40. And our aim is to give more knowledge and education for the woman about perimenopause and menopause. And I am hosting this podcast series where we discuss about menopause from inside out. And we will discuss about how hormone decline can affect our whole body from our mind to skin and bone. So today's podcast is about menopause inside out, the gut and hormone connections nobody's talked about. So this podcast is for education only and it's not to replace the medical advice. In this episode, we will deep dive into the powerful and often overlooked connections between hormone changes and gut health during perimenopause and menopause. I have my friends, consultant gastroenterologist, Dr. Stavarella Pelletari with me. And in this podcast, we will talk about four main things. Why gut microbiomes can change during this stage of transition, and why symptoms like bloating, constipations, and irritable bowel syndrome, known as IBS, become more common during this stage of life, and what we can do about it. We also talk about bidirectional link between gut and brain axis. And we'll finish our podcast with a bit of the practical strategy, medical insight, and lifestyle changes that can help you feel more in control of your body again. So, Dr. Pelletari, can you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Hi, my name is Dr. Pelletari. I am a consultant gastroenterologist, and I work both in the NHS, a Royal Free Hospital, and also privately as part of the HCA, Digestive Health UK, and Princess Grace Hospital. So we do obviously see a lot of patients, and especially women during menopause, complaining about their gut symptoms. So I think it's a very important subject to address.
Definitely. So first, let's start with understanding the basic facts about IBS and menopause. So what actually happens to our gut when we enter perimenopause and menopause?
So generally, we know that hormones like estrogen and progesterone do line the whole gut. So when menopause or perimenopause, these hormones fluctuate, changes in the gut motility, in the gut microbiome, and in the whole permeability of the gut, the interactions between what we eat and what absorbed by us, our blood supply changes. So women do feel that the digestion suddenly has changed, and it is quite literally the thing that the digestion has changed, things have changed.
Yes. As a menopause specialist, one thing that I have to put across is menopause is not about just period stopping. It can affect our whole body. So the gut health is part of the things that most women can feel a bit different during this stage of transition. So yes, when the hormone decline, our gut become more sensitive and the digestion might not be as predictable as it used to be. In terms of the lifestyle medicine point of view, because of changes happening in our body during this hormone transition, we do like to focus on what is within our control. So small, consistent changes to our lifestyle can make a huge difference also.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So why are women more likely to develop IBS or worsening in their symptoms of IBS during this stage of life?
So in general, we know that women are more prone to get IBS, so twice as likely to get IBS than men. So that is a fact. And then menopause obviously adds a second wave to that. So it is a combination, I would say, of the falling estrogen, the hypersensitivity of the gut lining, and the change in the microbiome, along with the stress that comes with menopause and perimenopause, that makes them much more likely to develop those symptoms and be more prone to get what we call IBS.
Yes, you clearly mentioned about the stress as one of the things. So yes, we do see a lot of like menopause and perimenopause women during that transition and hormone fluctuation. It also sometimes change how the brain chemical response and how they have to deal with like a more emotional stability, and they are not able to cope with things that they used to cope before. So yes, stress can be higher during this transition, and I totally agree that it can be part of the contributing factor. So how do hormones like estrogen and progesterone influence the gut microbiome?
So estrogen itself supports the microbial diversity. So it supports good bacteria like lactobacilli, for example, that we see in a lot of probiotic supplements. But when estrogen starts falling, then this balance and the ratio between the good and bad bacteria starts to shift. And that can itself cause more symptoms because of what we call dysbiosis, so this imbalance. So that can lead to the symptoms of bloating that a lot of women will describe, or change in the bowel habit in general. Progesterone by itself is just affects the motility, so it slows the gut motility, and it can make constipation, which we find quite commonly in women of that age, more of a basic symptom.
Yes, definitely. Hormone decline definitely helps with the imbalance in the gut microbiomes. One thing I would like to put is like there is something called estrobolome,
Yes.
which is kind of like a collection of specific gut bacteria, usually break down and regulate estrogen level in our body. So, having the balance of that collection of gut bacteria helps with maintaining the stable level of estrogen in the body. So, like you mentioned, dysbiosis is a term that we use for imbalance, imbalance in the gut microbiome. So having the good gut, sort of like a microbiome, really helps with having enough adequate level of estrogen, something that we need to talk about. Yeah. So can you explain the gut-brain axis in simple terms and why it matter here?
So you kind of have to think of it like a two-way motorway. Both the gut and the brain send signal to each other via the vagus nerve, and that any changes, for example, in our brain affect the gut. Any changes in the gut, like if the gut is inflamed or unhappy, it can affect our mood and our brain. It is a two-way kind of interaction. It's important to understand. So during menopause, as we said before, the stress can affect both ways. So the hormones that are produced in the gut can affect the brain, and the brain, because of the stress that we feel, can make the gut feel worse. So both states are kind of hyper alerted, and that can make symptoms worse.
Yes, definitely. So the key message here is it is coming in bidirectional way. So gut can affect the brain, and the brain can affect the gut. So it's all go back into the feedback loop also. And I think that's why it is very important to calm our nervous system. Do that by having restorative sleep and stress management, because it will help to give our body, and also having a better sort of like a stable gut microbiomes, and that will definitely helps with calming down the nervous system again, because they go back in the feedback loop. So let's focus on the symptoms and real life experience. Why do so many women suddenly experience bloating or food sensitivity in their 40s?
Yeah, that's as you said, like a most common, probably, and most disturbing symptom for women. So I would say it's probably a couple of things. One is generally the hormones. So the estrogen itself, as we said, it does change the microbiome. So because the microbiome changes, then the foods ferment differently. So foods that you could tolerate before, maybe now you cannot tolerate them because of the fermentation patterns that change. So it's not a new allergy, it's just that foods ferment differently that cause different symptoms. And the other thing is generally, again, the hormones can affect what we call, as we said, the permeability of the bowel. So there's the interaction, the leaky gut that we mentioned. So it's easier for toxins or additives from the foods to enter a bloodstream, and that can cause more symptoms in general. So I think it's a change that happens due to hormones that makes the bloating even worse.
Yes. So during perimenopause and menopause, your body is changing at multiple level at the same time. So just like you mentioned, definitely when the hormone imbalance happen, it can cause gut microbiome diversity change. And at the same time, leaky gut is another things that we focus on these times. And with the leaky gut, that can cause more chronic inflammation in the body. And when there is an inflammatory process happening in the body, it can also affect our brain and our mood. So these are all connected at a different level. So yes, it's very good point that you mentioned about the leaky gut. How can we tell the difference between normal gut changes and something that needs medical attention?
Yeah, it's obviously so IBS. It is based on particular criteria to be diagnosed, but we always need to rule out other causes as well. So I would say with symptoms related to IBS, or what we call them like brain gut interaction kind of symptoms, they normally fluctuate. They come and go. They can come gradually. They are normally linked with dietary changes or changes in the lifestyle. They get better after opening the bowels or doing some little kind of changes in our everyday routine. These are things that are reassuring normally. If a bloating comes and goes, if the symptoms get better after you go to the toilet, that is a reassuring symptom. If things persist, or obviously if there are what we call red flag symptoms present, then people need to be checked, need to get medical advice and rule out other important conditions first.
Yes, like you mentioned, IBS and bloatings are very, very common. And we also see that as a private GP, NHS GP, and also menopause specialist, I see that most women present with these symptoms. We see that a lot. But still, each and every symptoms like this still need proper assessment. So the message here is do not ignore your symptoms, and then always try to speak to your medical professional, and then so that they can have a look at things more as a general perspective. And one thing that I want to mention is the good medicine is about joining the dots, within the whole picture, and looking at the whole picture without missing anything important. So yes, it is very important to consider other causes that can cause the similar symptoms.
Yeah.
So what are the red flag symptoms women should never ignore?
Yeah, what we call about red flags, it's a few things. So from the bowel perspective, for example, we're talking about change in bowel habit, that it's unexpected and it lasts for a long time. It's rectal bleeding, so bleeding from your bowel during your stool. Unexpected weight loss. It can be associated with anemia, a palpable like a mass that you can feel in your tummy, things like that. Or also from a gynecology perspective, you can have like bleeding after menopause. So all of those things need to be checked either with blood tests, stool tests, or more invasive investigations like scans, colonoscopy, things to make sure that there is no sinister causes for your symptoms before we dive into the lifestyle changes and other approaches that we can, engage for symptoms like IBS.
Yes, definitely. IBS symptoms can be quite vague, and sometimes it varies with each and every individual woman. And some women might think that they have to put up with that. So the message here is you don't need to just put up with it, and because you feel like this is the menopause or menopause related, because we cannot make an assumption like that either. So there are so many other conditions that might present with the overlapping symptoms. So it is very important to consider about the other possibility. So why do stress and anxiety seems to worsen gut symptom during menopause?
This is what we discussed before. We know that chronic stress increases the cortisol levels. Cortisol itself affects the gut by, again, changing the motility, increasing the leaky gut effect, again, has changes in the microbiome. So all of that does affect the gut. Also, we know that sleep disturbances that can be linked with menopause can exacerbate the sensitivity of the gut, so make the gut even more sensitive nerve-wise, and that these alert states that they happen because of poor sleep, because of changes in our routine, because of the changes in a woman's body at menopause, I think they all affect the gut with all the things that we discussed before. So it is the gut-brain axis that is hyper alerted, as we said, and the effect of cortisol with estrogen decline together has an extra effect.
Yes, definitely. I mean, we always mention about stress repeatedly because stress is not just emotional, it is biological, and it can affect, like you mentioned, all the different part of the guts. And stress is not only for gut, it can also affect our sleep and how we manage our appetite, craving, and inflammation in the body. So I would like to put a message across, like stress management is not like a luxury things, it is a necessity that we have to do the simple practice for daily to manage our stress level down as much as we can.